from the Dark Imp, helping parents reclaim family time by playing board games together. Now today I want to talk to you about house rules, specifically house rules you could implement to keep everyone at the table for longer. Really what we want in a game to keep everybody engaged is for scores to stay reasonably level for as long as possible. That increases engagement as people think they've still got a chance of winning. So it's a good idea to look for games that have good catch-up mechanisms or rubber banding, which is one way of describing it, to help, to penalise the leaders or to help the current losers or the people trailing to catch up. But if you're playing a game that doesn't have those mechanisms built in, you might want to add some house rules to modify it a bit. Now, of course, every game works in a different way, and I can't give you ideas that that will work for every game. So you need to look at the game and work out the best way of adapting it, of creating house rules to make sure that the scores stay level for longer. It might be that you get an additional resource at the beginning of each turn, for example, if you're at the bottom. Those things that aren't necessarily built into the game will help families with the scores staying a little bit more level. Now, I'd like to give you 10 ways. Let's look at one game in particular. Let's look at Rummy, one of my favourite card games. You can do it with the standard deck of cards. And here are 10 different ways that you might adjust the scoring to keep the playing field a little bit more level, to keep everybody interested in the game, and to keep everyone at the table. Here we go. Number 1, you could use weighted scoring. So in Rummy, when you have a hand of cards and 7 cards, we start off with 7. You might end up with more depending on what rules you're playing, and the round finishes when somebody gets rid of all their cards on the table. You're making runs and you're making sets. When that happens, the round ends and you score up. The person who's got rid of their cards scores 0. That's a perfect score. You want to score as little as possible. Everybody else counts up and sees how much they've scored. So if I had a hand like this, I'd score 10 points for the 10 and 10 points for the jack. That's 20. I'd score 18 points for the 2 9s. That's 38. I'd score 8 points for the 8. That's 46. I'd score 4 points for the 4. That's 50. 52. So I'd be up to 52 points already if I had that hand and hadn't put anything down before the first player went out. I'd be on 52 points. That's quite difficult because then I'm quite a long way behind. Have another round, maybe I get another 3 points, have another round, maybe someone else has a bad round, but you already feel like you're playing quite a long way behind. So you could, the first way to combat this is to have weighted scoring. If you go out first, you get 0 points. Then you count up the scores. The player with the next lowest score would get 1 point. The player with the next lowest, 2. And the player with the next lowest, 3. Obviously carrying on if you've got more players. The second thing you could do is you could introduce a buy-in. Now, in Rummy, for example, you max out when you get 100 points, that's the end of the game. You can, but what we always used to do when I was a child, and what works quite well, is if you allow each player 1 buy-in. So you draw a line under the 100 points, and then you look for the next highest score. So say I went out on 100 quite early in the game, and the next player only had 29 points. I would draw a line under my score and write 29. I've had a buy-in. I can't have another buy-in. I bought in at the next highest score. So we've got maybe one player on 10, one player on 16 and one on 29, and then I buy in at that score as well. Then we keep playing. Now we keep going, everybody gets higher. The next time that somebody gets, if it's somebody else that gets 100 points, they also get to buy in, but maybe the scores are higher now. They will be higher. So they'll have to buy in at a higher score. The last player to buy in is going to buy in at a really high score. So everybody gets a chance to buy in once, but you get more of an advantage if you've done badly at the beginning of the game. That's the buy-in. Number 3, use a joker. Allow each player, it doesn't have to be an actual joker, it could be anything, it could be a cuddly toy. Each player gets a joker or some sort of implement, and at one time, a spoon, maybe a spoon. And once during the game, you can choose at the end of the round to play your joker and say that my score isn't going to count this turn. So if you've had a really terrible score and you've got 60 points or something, you can say, do you know what, I'm going to play my joker. You can only play it once during the game, but that's a way of negating a really bad round for you. Another thing you could do, and this isn't really to do with scoring, but it's more to do with the play, is when you get your initial hand of 7 cards, you look at them, and if you don't like them, or you think it's a terrible starting hand, you can allow a mulligan. So in Rummy, what you'd do is you'd get rid of those 7 cards, you'd shuffle them into the draw deck, and then you'd take the next cards, but you'd have to take 8. You'd take 1 more than what you got. So you'd start with more cards that you have to get rid of. But it would give you a different set of cards, and maybe it would give you more things that you think can be played together. So that's a mulligan, that's what you call a mulligan, if you get rid of your hand and pick up a new one. Or, for Rummy, you could have a Rummy dummy. So you deal a hand for every player, but you deal an extra one, and that's the dummy hand. Now, you look at your hand, and the dummy hand stays there, and then in turn, from the player who is currently in last position, each player gets a chance to say whether they'd like to use their own hand or pay to use the dummy hand. So that's another way of using a different hand, but you have to pay for the privilege of taking that dummy hand. Number 7, you could introduce seasons. So let's say you get to 100 points, you bust out, it doesn't, you know, all we're doing now is we're going to count that as a win, or it's a bit like weighted scoring. So you play a whole game, you've busted out at 100. Maybe you've also had the buy-in. Maybe you've also had the mulligan. They can all work together. You busted out at 100, and that's the end of the game. Well, it's quite nice if then the score for that game goes into a score for the season. So you're playing lots of different games over a season of games, and the season can be as long or as short as you want. So you get 0 points if you win the game, you get 1 point if you come second in the game, 2 points third, etc, etc. And you're trying to get the lowest score over the season. And you can stop the season if somebody gets too far ahead and say, do you know what, we're just going to call it a day, we're going to create a new season, it doesn't matter. And then it takes the focus a little bit off the results of the game and puts it more onto the results of the season. Okay, number 8, you could keep the scores secret. So each time you have a hand, you count up your score, and you secretly whisper it or tell it to the person who's got the scoreboard. And that probably will be, you know, a parent who's keeping scores. But it stops siblings from, you know, ribbing each other about the scores they've got, or saying I'm doing better than you or something like that. So you could keep a secret scoreboard. And, you know, just every now and then you could do who's in first, second, third and fourth if you want to, but you don't have to. You could just, it could all be secret, and then the parent could say, right, that's the end of the game because such and such has busted out. So that's number 8. Number 9, you could really put the focus on beating your own previous score. So instead of trying to beat everybody else, see how many rounds you can stay in before you bust out. Beat your previous score, keep a note of how many rounds you stayed in, don't worry too much about what the other players are doing. And finally, just don't score. Just keep playing, just play hands, just play rounds. We often do this. Play rounds without writing anything down. It doesn't, you know, it increases the enjoyment of playing and takes the pressure off the results. So there you go, 10 ways to modify to create house rules to modify the scoring of rummy, or to keep everybody at the table for longer.